Welcome to Green Disruptors, Scaling the Future, a podcast where we dive into the innovations transforming clean energy and the real business challenges of making sustainability scalable. From breakthrough technologies to the tough decisions behind growth, we explore what it takes to build a greener future at scale. I'm your host, Megan Kjar, and my mission is to help green tech companies tell stories that matter. This podcast is brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing. Okay, welcome back to Green Disruptors. Today, we are going to be focusing on the agriculture and food security section of the whole climate problem. So I'm happy to have Usman with me today. Sorry, I'm fumbling already, but I'm going to let you give us an intro into your background and what you've been doing.
Great. Thank you, Megan, for having me on your show. And really looking forward to invigorating conversation today. So,
yeah, you were getting me really fired up on our pre-call. So I'm like, oh, I should have just recorded that. He's got so many interesting things going on. So
yeah, great. Thanks.
Dive in.
Yeah. So, as you know, I'm Usman. I was born and bred in Pakistan. I know how many of you are familiar with Pakistan, but it's a country right next to India and South Asia, one of the poorest countries in the world. I started off my career with Exxon Chemicals selling fertilizers to farmers. And then I moved to Nestle, the food company, where I was dealing with a lot of dairy farmers, collecting milk from them. And then I joined a Norwegian telecom company called Telenor. And it is there when I was part of a team that launched EasyPesa, which is one of the world's largest banking platforms for non-smartphone. So at that time, this is back in 2009, a lot of people, especially in the rural economy, did not have smartphones because of lack of internet connectivity and because of the cost of smartphones. So at that time,
they weren't getting access to all this convenient banking, but they need it just as much as everyone else does. Yeah,
exactly. So they were financially excluded from mainstream banking. And so much so that if they had to send money from one city to another, they would actually give it to a bus driver who would then carry it. Hello?
Yeah, sorry, you went dark for a moment, but we were talking about how they'd give their money to the bus.
Yeah. So for people to send their money from a city to back home in their village to their families, they had to probably wait for 2 days before the money arrived.
And that would be the longest 2 days of your life.
Exactly. And a lot of people in rural economies, they work in cities and their families stay back in the villages. So every now and then they send money back home. So because of the lack of internet connectivity and because of the lack of smartphones at that point in time, they were really struggling to even access these basic facilities. So I was part of the team that actually came up with this idea that why not make a platform that could actually use just simple dumb phones and did not require internet. So now it's in fact the second largest banking platform in the world after M-Pesa. There are almost billions of transactions that happen on it, and now lots of different things that have different features that it's expanded into. So what I realized after that launch was that you could use basic technology to address serious issues at the bottom of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. And that's when I quit my job. I'd been working and I thought that maybe it's time for a reset. So I quit my job. I was lucky enough to get into MIT. And I took some time off to recalibrate my life and see what do I want to do with it for the rest of my
How old were you?
So I was 37.
Yeah. That seems to be a transition point for a lot of people, but going back to school, that's a big undertaking.
That is correct. So, but I think going to MIT was one of the best things that could happen because it gave me the opportunity to meet with some of the most brilliant people in the world, to get exposed to what is happening beyond my small exposure. So I went there with the mindset that I'd like to come up with an idea that could help farmers because I'd been working with farmers.
And that's what you knew.
a lot of farmers, they live in rural economies. So I started working on my startup idea, and by the time I graduated, I had set up my company, met my three other brilliant co-founders from MIT, and we were up and running.
And the
So
company is Ricult,
the
correct?
company is Ricult. That is correct. Yes. So we started operations first in Pakistan, and then we moved to Thailand, and then to Vietnam. And now here we are. We have more than 1 million downloads. Farmers registered with our platform. We help them uh, improve their profitability and reduce their costs by using AI platforms and models, which sources data from multiple stakeholders in the agricultural value chain, including remote sensing, advanced weather analytics, and other sources of data, which then pass through our process through our proprietary algorithms. And then we come up with actionable insights, which are free for farmers to use, but we monetize and sell these insights to different organizations in to to crop processing mills, to agribusinesses, whoever is interested in making database decisions.
Okay, so let's back it up a few steps here. I mean, obviously, a lot of the same problems that were happening in 2009 are probably still happening, but I imagine with advances in technology, the problems, there's a little difference between then and now. So what main problems do these rural farmers have, and what have you done to, I mean, you explained like your system, but how do you solve those problems?
So the biggest problem that farmers have, not only in South Asia or in Asia, but across the developing world, whether you go to Africa, whether you go to South America, whether you go to Asia, is access to capital. Unlike the US, where now I live, it's very easy for me to get a loan because all the bank has to do is to look at my credit score, and bingo, they'll decide in a few minutes that whether they want to extend the loan to me or not. But in developing economies, and especially in rural economies, it's very difficult for banks, and it's costly for banks to determine the credit worthiness of a farmer. And because
I mean, even if they did give somebody the time of day, how would they even do that? Do they go and someone inspects the farm and look at their books in person? That's a nightmare. No one would do that.
Yeah. And not only that, it's not just it's not just looking at the book once. They have to have some kind of a monitoring mechanism where they're constantly going and checking if the farm is still working, if the farm is still operational, if the crop is healthy. So all these things require a lot of manpower, which is very costly and it's not efficient.
Which is fair from a bank perspective, because if you're going to make an investment, you want to protect your, well, maybe not totally.
I have my rules. So in my views, banks, unfortunately, and I get a lot of flack from this for this, but I believe banks are designed to help the rich get richer. They're not designed to help the poor get richer. So so if you do a risk adjusted return, even if they were to lend to a farmer, they would have such a high interest rate that it wouldn't be feasible for a poor guy to actually.
So the bank makes a ton of money and puts the farmer out of business. I mean, that's just totally unethical.
But I mean, having said that, I still feel that banks are a better option for farmers than
loan sharks.
Than loan sharks. So because they can't access banks, they end up relying on loan sharks, which are even worse, 10x worse than banks. They not only charge an incredibly high interest rate, but they also control their entire supply chain. So they do not give cash to farmers. What they do is that they will provide in-kind loans, a combination of in-kind loans and cash. The in-kind loans
give them seeds and the fertilizer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And normally those seeds, fertilizers, pesticides are of very low quality because they make a high margin on giving them low quality products. And then when the farmer harvests the crop, these loan sharks have the first right of refusal in buying the crop harvest. So it's a very
corrupt market,
exploitative arrangement. where
Yeah.
where the loan sharks have incredible power over these farmers. So the idea that we wanted to actually bring in or implement was, what if we could reduce the cost and the time that it takes for a bank to determine whether a farmer is credit worthy or not, and whether and can we use technology to help the farmer improve his farm productivity, so that the
Improve the
bank,
yield.
yeah, so the bank is also satisfied with his performance, and then he also has the ability to pay back the loan. So it's like a virtuous circle where
Yeah.
the farmer is doing what he's supposed to do and the bank is doing what they're supposed to do, and all of them is enabled through technology, which is transparent, which is um, uh, cheap, and which is very efficient.
And
So
there's no buses or lawn sharks.
exactly. So that's what, in a nutshell, the platform does. It helps us assess the credit worthiness of a farm and in partnership with the bank, and then it helps the bank monitor the farm on a regular basis to make sure that the farmer is doing what it's supposed to do.
Okay. I mean, that's just so cool. I love this. So can you maybe give us like an individual case study of what that process was like with you being in touch with the farm, connecting them with the bank, and just, I mean, hopefully a success story.
Yeah, I mean, there are many success stories. On average, we've increased farm profitability by 17% over the last almost 5 years. And that's a pretty strong number. It has helped almost hundreds of thousands of farmers access bank loan. It has helped banks enter into new markets. So I remember a couple of areas where when we entered, the farmers had not even met a bank employee. And this is the first
Wow.
time that they knew that there's a bank and they can actually get loans without so many restrictions.
Are
So
these typically banks that are in their same country?
yeah. Of course,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are banks. There's in the same country. There are banks that also have some kind of bank branch with and
Close ish.
a certain close. So there are many examples. I mean, I remember this one example where there's this woman in Thailand who normally used to sell her crop before they were harvested because she needed the money at a certain
So
point in time.
desperately.
So
Hmm.
desperate. So unfortunately, one of the problems with agriculture is that you can't set the time. There's a
Yeah.
certain time when you
It's
need the money and there's a certain time when you'll get the money. You can't change that because you have to sow at a certain period of time and you have to harvest at a certain period of time. But there's some people who are so desperate that they'll sell at a discount because they need the money. So there's
yeah.
this single parent who had about 4 kids. She was so desperate that she would actually sell her crop at a 30% discount. But when we worked with her and we helped her get access to loans, her profitability increased by almost 50%.
Wow.
And yeah, and
Just
then
because
she
she didn't
became
have
one
to
of our,
slash the prices
exactly,
anymore because she had
exactly.
access to
Yeah,
capital.
exactly. And she became one of our biggest supporters in that area. So lots of such stories. But at the end of the day, I think it gives me satisfaction that I can help people live a better life. And
I
I
mean,
think
that's
that in
incredible.
itself, yeah,
Like that's profound. Like even just thinking of the difference you made for that one woman and her 4 kids. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
This has been, I mean, quite a roller coaster of emotions. So you have tough
Oh, I'm
times, you
sure.
have good times, but at the end of the day, I think the net result is positive because you're actually changing lives, and that's what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, and that's obviously like big farms, like, they produce a lot of food and that's good. But like if you're boosting local economies, despite like solving food insecurity problems, these people that, can build more wealth can contribute to other factors in advancement of green technologies in their own communities. So it's
That is
like,
correct. That is correct. So you'll be surprised to know that most rural economies are actually the backbone of developing countries. So even in countries like Pakistan, about 60% of the GDP is dependent on agriculture. If you go to Thailand, about 40% is dependent on agriculture. If you go to India, it's about 40% dependent on agriculture. So not only is it that they can bring change in their communities, but they actually have help move the country forward. And
I mean, out of third world status.
yeah, yeah. I don't know how familiar you are with this, but by 2050, the world will need double the food that it produces today.
Yeah, I've heard
So
this.
in about 25 years, if we don't double our food, we'll have a lot of wars, a lot of issues, which I think a lot of people are thinking about this and how it's going to impact things in the future. But I think it's not just a problem related to one particular country or one particular area. It's a global issue. And one way or the other, if we don't solve this, it's going to become a problem later on. And then there's another problem linked to this, which probably provides a segue into what I want to talk more about, is how this impacts climate change. So a lot of farm practices actually lead to greenhouse gas emissions, which is not good for our planet. And 40% of all methane gas emissions are because of agriculture. So
is this apart from like methane from cows, or is that linked?
no, so out of that 40%, about 30% is because of cows, and the 70% is because of practices on the farm. So what happens is that bulk of the carbon is stored in the soil. And once you start changing tilling it up or applying water or flooding it, it actually starts releasing carbon. So most of the farmers are not even aware of this. Most countries are not aware of this. And unfortunately, whether it's a rich country or a poor country, we still live on the same planet. So climate is a great equalizer.
Yeah, for better and for worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse. So there's not much you can do if you're living in a rich country and someone in a poor country is releasing methane gas. It's going to affect you one way or the other. So that is another area that we're trying to address now. Because we work with so many farmers and we have access to their farms, we can help them change their practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but help them make money by doing that.
Yes,
by selling carbon
more
credits.
Profitable and reduce emissions. Okay, so how does that work?
Yeah, that the way it works is that so all farmers till the land. Then there are different ways to reduce greenhouse gas emission. One way is to reduce tilling. If you're talking about a crop where you don't apply a lot of water, but for crops that use a lot of water flooding, like rice.
Yeah,
you don't need to focus on the tilling part as much as you need to focus on reducing the application of water. So we have close to, I think about 15% of our farm base is rice farmers.
Yeah.
And what we're starting to work with them is to help them implement the methodology, which is called alternate wet drying. What that does is
alternate wet drying.
Yeah. So instead of in a normal traditional rice farm, you flood the field for almost 4 to 6 weeks. In alternate wet drying, you actually reduce that by half. So you'll flood it for a week, then you'll keep it dry for a week, then you'll flood it for a week, then you'll keep it dry for a week. And that way you actually reduce the water application by almost 50%, which then reduces greenhouse gas emissions by almost 50%. So
tons of water less. 50%.
That's tons of less water, that's tons of less electricity, that's tons
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and then tons of less methane gas release. And the reason why we can do this at scale is because our AI tools enable us to bring in a lot of transparency when monitoring the practices of the farmer. So if you want to generate carbon credits from this process, you need to be able to collect data which can be verified so that global registries like Gold Standard or Vera can then validate this. So because we all have all the tools in place to monitor all of this transparently, then all we need to do is that use that data to validate the practices and then convert them into carbon credits and then share the revenues of the carbon credits with the fund.
So how hard is it to convince farm to change the way they're doing things if they've been doing them that way for thousands of years?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So it's not easy. Farmers generally are very short term in thinking.
They're thinking about the next harvest.
Exactly. Not even the next harvest. They're thinking about the next day, not the next harvest. so,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
so it's not easy to tell them to change something that they've been doing for centuries. The circle of trust generally is just limited to their family or
the way their father taught them to do it.
exactly, or other opinion leader farmers within a certain community that they respect and they believe they're successful. So it's not easy, but then at the end of the day, I think it all boils down to the incentives. If you can convince farmers that they can make more money and reduce costs and just get them to try it once, and if it works, then there's nothing like seeing something succeed. So
Well, I mean,
you
and
do it
that's
on,
where I'm sure those AI
yeah,
tools are really powerful. Like you can
yes,
literally show them, which is really marketing. You're
exactly,
saying, here's the
exactly,
data.
yeah.
Does your company spend a lot of time like building case studies that you can come in with to these
Uh,
farmers?
yes, we do. So that's part of our farmer recruitment program, where
Mm-hmm.
we actually not only do we build these case studies, but within a particular community, we'll work with a particular farm to set up a demo farm.
Oh, that's great. Do
Yeah,
they get
so
it at like a reduced price just
they
so
get
you
it for
can
free. They get it for
for
free.
free? Wow.
But the idea is that other farmers within that community can actually come and see how this works, so that it helps them address their concerns.
That's brilliant because they're
Yes.
seeing someone who lives in their community who's like
Yeah.
them doing what they're doing,
Yes.
who's open to this new way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So farm marketing is actually quite different from the normal kind of marketing that we see, because changing perceptions for these people is not very easy. They've been scammed so many times that
Oh,
they're
I believe
very,
that.
very, they don't trust people that easily.
So when you were just getting started with Ricult and going in, trying to get credit to these farms, like how did you even find these people?
So they're already on our database. As I mentioned, we already close to 1 million farms registered on our database. And out of
Okay.
those, yeah, million, almost 15% are rice farmers.
So, I mean, is it a matter of like, did you have to manually call them up on the phone? Do they
Yes.
have access to
So,
email?
so they have access to our app. We have a farmer app, which they can download and they use for farm productivity. So through that, we can actually connect with them and talk to them and see, what can be done.
Well, I mean, so I guess the question is like you're implementing this phase two that's helping increase efficiency. What's the like what are you currently working like where are you in that process right now?
So we've just started this process. Actually, we're targeting the next rice season, which starts in May. This is the first time we'll actually do these carbon credits. So let's see how it goes.
Well, I'm curious just from a local perspective here. Here in Utah, our biggest challenge is water, but we actually are a pretty high agricultural state because there are a lot of rural areas here. And so, yeah, water conservation is the biggest thing. Like, what can modern companies utilize that these rural farms are doing that would also be beneficial all across the board? Like, or I guess the better way to ask that is, are modern farms like in the US and, developed countries, are they already doing the carbon credit incentivizing thing, or is it still slow to
No, it is.
be adopted?
There are certain companies in the US that are actually working in this space. They haven't been able to crack it for many reasons. First of all, in the US, so let's put it this way. If I can sell a carbon credit for $20 a ton and I give $10 to a farmer in Thailand or in Pakistan, that's substantial in terms of his overall income.
Mhm.
If I give $10 to a farmer in the US, it's not worth his time. So the incentives don't align that way. And it's not very easy to actually increase the price of a carbon credit because at the end of the day, it's the same process, whether you do it in one part of the world or you do it in another part of the world. So from that perspective, it's difficult to convince farmers to put in the effort to actually make changes in the way they work. In fact, I
Whereas
was
I
in talks
imagine
with,
here,
yeah,
it would be more effective just to raise the price of water. Because then
exactly. Yeah, that's a
it
much better way to do that. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a much better way to do that. People will start reducing, using less water.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we go over before we wrap it up here?
Nothing much. I think one of the reasons I normally attend such talks is to spread this message that one single individual can make an impact. So everyone should just try and see within his area of influence what can he do or she do to change the world and make it a better place.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's becoming a theme in the podcast is like people have so many gifts and talents and experience in their businesses. And really, it almost doesn't even matter what field you're in, there's something you can do. And so but what your impact is truly inspiring. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for what you do at Ricult and for the people you help and for sharing your time with us today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll have to follow up and see how this project is going in
Sure.
6 months.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks,
Thank
Usman.
you, Megan. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Green Disruptors today. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with a friend or leave us a review wherever you listen. Until next time, thanks for doing your part to solve climate issues.